Wherapy. Therapy wherever, whenever.
Hello, and welcome to Coffee with a Therapist. My name is Philip Anderson. I am a therapist and the founder of Wherapy. Today, I'm going to talk about OCD, what OCD is, how OCD develops, and relate that to anxiety. And I'm also going to tell you how OCD can be treated. But before we begin, I want to let you know about my therapy world tour. So, my ambition in my career is to treat one person from every country in the world. And in order to achieve this, I am offering one free therapy session to one person from 3 countries every week. And I post those countries on Monday on my Instagram account, but I'm also revealing one country in each segment of today's podcast. So please stay tuned throughout the podcast to find out which countries I am offering one free therapy session to. So, without further ado, let's begin. Welcome to the first section of the podcast. And in this section, we're going to discuss what is OCD. But before I do that, I'm going to introduce to you the first country in my therapy world tour this week. And that country is Guatemala. So if you live in Guatemala, or if you're from Guatemala and you're interested in a free therapy session, then just go over to Wherapy's Instagram account at Wherapy_ENG and send me a direct message. And if you're the first one to do this, then you'll get a free therapy session. And this is part of, as I told you earlier, my therapy world tour. So my ambition is to have one therapy session with one person from every country in the world. So I'm going to continue to offer this every week. And if you want to follow it, go over to at Wherapy_ENG and follow me there, because I'm uploading 3 new countries every Monday. Yeah. So what is OCD? O stands for obsessive, C stands for compulsive, and D stands for disorder. And this is a mental illness that affects both men and women equally, and is kind of available in all but affects all different age groups. A lot of the time it starts during puberty or early adulthood, but there are people who develop it later in life as well. And an obsession is an unwanted thought or image or urge that repeatedly enters our mind. And a compulsion is a repetitive behavior or a mental act that we feel like we need to do to temporarily relieve ourselves of the anxiety associated to the obsession. And OCD is a vicious circle. Yeah? And for those of you who are watching this on YouTube, you will be able to see that in this circle it begins with an obsessive thought. Yeah? So here we have an obsessive thought, and that leads to an anxiety developing. If I don't do this, then I'm going to have anxiety. Yeah? And I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in the next part of the podcast. And that anxiety, in turn, leads to a compulsive behavior. And that compulsive behavior gives a temporary relief. So this is the vicious circle of OCD. So a temporary relief that leads to an obsessive thought. Yeah, it goes back. Yeah. We're never really free from this obsession. Yeah. So this is how OCD works. And in the next part of the podcast, I'm going to talk about how OCD develops. And as you know, this is linked to anxiety. So what I'm going to introduce to you in the next part of the podcast is how we become a person with OCD. So stay tuned for that. So, welcome to the second part of the podcast. In the first part of the podcast, we took a look at what OCD is. And now we're going to look at how OCD develops. And we're going to link it to anxiety. But before we begin, let me introduce to you the second country in the free podcast countries. So if you didn't watch the first part and didn't watch the intro to this podcast, or listen to it rather, I am offering one free therapy session to one person from every country in the world as part of my therapy world tour. Yeah? And every week I introduce 3 countries which I'm offering it to. And the first person to send me a direct message from these countries that I mention in the podcasts will get one free therapy session. Yeah? And they can contact me in Wherapy's through Wherapy's Instagram account at Wherapy_ENG, or my personal Instagram account at WherapyPhil, or through Facebook. And that's also Wherapy and Philip Anderson. Yeah? So just search for me there and get in contact with me. And the second country is New Caledonia. So if you're from New Caledonia and you want a free therapy session, get over to Instagram and get in contact with me. So without further ado, how does anxiety, or rather, how does OCD develop as a result of anxiety? And I think the anxiety aspect of OCD is overlooked because we have an anxiety within us that we're trying to control compulsively, C, and we have an obsession over, O. So we do something in order to stop the anxiety from developing because we're quite afraid of having that anxiety. And for those of you who have followed me quite a long time, you would have seen my graphs about anxiety. And so this might be a little bit of a repetition for you guys, but I think it's quite an interesting way to think of OCD. Yeah. So we have, for those of you who are watching on YouTube, you will be able to see this, but I have 2 axes, one vertical, which is anxiety, and then one horizontal, which is time. Here you'll see it. And when we when we have an anxiety attack, or when we start feeling anxious, we feel like the anxiety is going up, obviously. And it's going up at quite a quick pace. And when we're in this state, we think that the anxiety will just keep on going up in the same at the same pace, and intensity. So we just imagine that it will go up like this, and that something crazy will happen up here. We'll get a heart attack, or we'll just have a complete meltdown. Yeah, and no one has ever died of anxiety. Yeah. It might feel as if you're going to, and a lot of people mistake panic attacks for heart attacks, and the like. But this is just an illusion. Yeah. But before we get to this point, yeah, when we're thinking about how it develops, we do something here. So for some of us, it's kind of we smoke a cigarette, we drink alcohol, we do drugs, we turn on the TV, we call our parents, or we call a loved one. We go out running, we go training, anything. Yeah. And for people who have an obsessive compulsive disorder or develop that, and they have very kind of small things that they do. Yeah. And once we do this thing, we feel like the anxiety goes down straight away. And this tells us that, well, this thing actually worked. Yeah. And then the next time anxiety comes back, it comes back even kind of sharper, quicker, more intense pace. Yeah? And then we do this thing again, and then it goes down again. Yeah. And then the next time it comes back, it happens again and again and again until we're here. Yeah. And this is where OCD lives. Yeah. We do the thing. We do that control. Yeah. I call it a control mechanism. Yeah. It's a kind of long word, so I don't really like it so much. But we do that control mechanism, yeah, or controlling action. Yeah. Before the anxiety develops. Yeah. So we do it. We think that, okay, well, if this glass isn't standing exactly here, then I'm going to get anxiety. So I'm going to put it exactly here. If I don't wash my hands, then I'm going to get anxiety. And this is linked back to a time much earlier when maybe someone got sick by not washing their hands. Yeah. And that person remembers that. So now they wash their hands before the anxiety actually kicks in. Yeah? It may have started this way. Yeah. It may have started that they kind of felt an anxiety and then they washed their hands. And then they felt better after that. And then they got anxiety again. It got up a little bit. It was a little bit more intense. They washed their hands and it went down again. And it just developed and developed and developed until they were washing their hands for maybe half an hour until their hands were red before the anxiety actually even comes. Yeah. They're expecting the anxiety to come, and that's where it becomes obsessive. Yeah. So I think this is quite a good way of thinking of um, OCD. Yeah. I hope that my explanation was clear enough for those of you who are not watching on my YouTube channel. Let me just repeat it for you guys. So anxiety goes in an upward trajectory. We try to control it by doing a certain action. That action makes us feel less anxious, but it affirms the anxiety. It affirms the anxiety's control over us. So the next time the anxiety comes back, it comes back more intense. So we do that action earlier. Yeah? And this pattern continues until we do the action before the anxiety is even there. Yeah? And that's why we develop this obsessive compulsive control, yeah, over all aspects of our lives. And in many cases, I've treated a lot of people who have had this, to a smaller degree. It can develop and become really bad where they can't even live properly. I've actually never met somebody who's to that degree, but um, washing their hands, checking the lock on the door, um, standing in the shower for several hours because they want to be as clean as possible. Yeah, and this is linked to an inner anxiety. Yeah, for some people with autism can kind of show the same symptoms without it being an obsessive compulsive disorder. Yeah. But it there is a clear link in this case to anxiety. So I think it's quite good to think of it in this way. Yeah. So in the next video, I'm going to talk about ways in which we can treat this. So, welcome to the third and final part of this week's podcast about OCD. So, in the first part, we talked about what OCD is. Then we talked about how OCD develops, and we've linked this to anxiety. And in the third part, we're going to talk about how we can treat OCD. But before I do that, I'm going to introduce the third and final country in this week's Therapy World Tour, and that country is Oman. So if you're from Oman and you want one free therapy session, make sure you're the first one to contact me, and do so by going over to at Wherapy_ENG on Instagram and send me a direct message. And if you want to know the 3 countries that I'm offering ahead of time, one day ahead of time, because I post the 3 countries every Monday on Instagram. Yeah. There's 3 new countries every week. And if you want to know that one day ahead of time, then make sure to subscribe to my newsletter, which is available at wherapy.com. Then you're going to get them on Sunday. So you're going to know about them on Sunday. So if you're from those countries, then you'll have one extra day to make sure that you're the first one to contact me. Yeah. So how do we treat OCD? And the first and maybe most important step is how we kind of relate to people with OCD, or if we have OCD in some sort of way, as the kind of letters say, OCD is an obsession. Yeah. So it might be that we come into a room and we need to make sure that we touch every object in the room, yeah, before we sit down, because otherwise we'll get an anxiety, which I talked about in the last section, yeah, that we think is going to develop so quickly and so intensely that something is going to happen with our person, that we're going to have a heart attack or just not exist. Yeah. So it's the threat or the negative consequences of not doing that action, which is obsessive, is so real to this person. Yeah. So we need to, if we have a person with OCD in our lives, then we need to make sure that we kind of have the kid gloves on a little bit. And if we are somebody who has some sort of OCD, yeah, and if you have it and you're watching this video, yeah, if you're kind of at that level of awareness of it, then your OCD will probably, without knowing you, not be so strong at such a strong level that it's affecting kind of your ability to live your life. Yeah. But so we need the first step is not to make it worse. Yeah. And that might sound funny, but sometimes we want to get a change so fast. Yeah, we want to feel good, feel normal. Yeah, the urge to feel normal and to have um, good mental health is so strong that we push ourselves, and it gives the absolute opposite effect. Yeah, and I've seen this with some patients, yeah, that um, they are in the shower for maybe 2 hours, and then the parents or they start to kind of work on themselves, yeah, and then it just the pressure just gets too much, and they end up in the shower for 3 or 4 hours, yeah, still not feeling clean, yeah. So we just want to kind of get the obsession to level off, yeah, that what they're doing at the current moment is enough, yeah. um, uh, if you're wondering why I'm so silent just now, it's because I'm writing on my whiteboard. Yeah, get the obsession to level off, and we do so by just kind of when, and now I'm talking kind of with the thought of somebody helping this person with OCD. Yeah. That person helping would kind of have to normalize what the person is doing and know the person's routine, and then say, well, it's good here. This is enough. Yeah. If you're wondering what that sound is in the background, it's my dog who's come into the studio, who's sat himself down. Yeah, or I don't know what he's doing. Um, but yeah, he's scratching on the floor. I can hear that now. So we need to kind of understand that person with OCD, their routine, and then we need to stop them when they feel the urge to go one step further than they usually do. Yeah. And then the second part is to uh, is obviously to work on the OCD. Yeah. And this is kind of after a longer period of normalizing the OCD, and we work on OCD um, by looking at the obsession. Yeah. Let me just write this down. Uh, 1 minute. Oh, I can't spell now. Whatever. So we do certain exercises. So if the OCD is connected to, for example, washing your hands, then it sounds very simple, but we have a timer next to the sink, and we wash our hands for 30 seconds, and then we stop the timer, yeah, or the timer goes off, and then we reset the timer to 5 minutes. And in those 5 minutes, we are not going to wash our hands. Yeah? And then for every time we do this, we make the time in between washing hands longer. Yeah. So the next time it will be 30 seconds, and then it would be maybe 10 minutes. Yeah? And we do this, we keep on doing this. Yeah? And OCD can kind of get worse if there's something in your life that is stressing you out as well. Yeah. So even if we're fully treated for OCD and we feel like we can live our lives properly, yeah, when that stress comes back in our lives, the OCD might come back as well. Yeah. So these exercises are very handy, and very good to have with us throughout our lives. Yeah, if we have this vulnerability, yeah, to having these compulsive acts. Yeah. So the exercises. Yeah, and then the third thing, which I think can help. Yeah, and this is something that I think um, somebody connected to the person with OCD would have to help with. Yeah, it's not so much the person themselves, but it's understanding what's going on in the body. Because when we have OCD, we're looking at what's outside of us. And so we're touching all the things in the room to make ourselves feel okay with the situation, yeah, to stop our anxiety, yeah. Or we're entering the room in a certain way, or we're touching the handle of the door to make sure that it's locked, or we're washing our hands in a certain way. So we're looking at the act, yeah. We're focusing outside of our body, and we're not focusing so much inside of our body, yeah. We're not looking at that anxiety, yeah. So keeping kind of an eye on that anxiety is very, very important, yeah. And this is where if you're a friend or a family member of somebody with OCD, you can help them with, yeah. This is an area that you can help them with, and that's simply by just being their anxiety coach. um, and here you can say, well, um, you, whatever your name is, yeah, whatever your friend's name is, I can see that you have anxiety now. I can see it because you are fidgeting with things, and I can see it in your eyes, and you're smiling in that nervous way. And I can suspect that you might have sweaty palms, and your heart might be beating that little bit faster, and you might be breathing that little bit faster as well. This is anxiety. Why do you think anxiety is here right now? Yeah. And then your friend would have to answer, yeah. Oh, well, it's because of this small room, or it's because of if I don't actually go into this room in this way, then this will happen. Okay, well, if that happens, then how will that affect you? Yeah. And you just keep them focused on the anxiety. So you have this role play with the person who has the anxiety, yeah. And you connect it to that bodily sensation of anxiety, yeah. You describe their anxiety, what you see, yeah. And you help them to describe what they see, and then you link it to what happens in the room, yeah. So you keep that focus on the anxiety, and the anxiety will eventually go away, yeah. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you will see it listed on the whiteboard. The three things to do is to get the OCD to level off, yeah. It sounds uh, easier said than done, yeah. And then the exercises that I mentioned with the timer, and then being the anxiety coach, yeah. So give these three things a try, and I'm sure you will see some positive effects. Thank you very much for listening to the podcast today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you like it, please follow on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. I put up a new podcast every other week about mental health. And if you are interested in following me on Instagram, it's Wherapy_ENG. And then also on Facebook, it's Wherapy. And Twitter, I don't use that much, but I also have an account there. So just search for Wherapy if you're interested. And of course, YouTube. Otherwise, I offer therapy sessions for $70 a session, online sessions, available at wherapy.com. And I also have a bunch of online courses there available with a subscription to Wherapy Plus. So if you're interested, just go over there and check it all out. Otherwise, have a great day and take care of yourself.